This is Caring for Kids on News Talk 760 WJR, presented by the Children's Foundation. And here's your host, President and CEO of the Children's Foundation, Larry Burns.
Thanks, Mark. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Caring for Kids, July edition. Tonight we have another great episode of Caring for Kids featuring three very special guests who are all making huge strides at advancing the health and wellness of children and families. So joining us on the show tonight will be Holli Seabury. She's the Executive Director of the Delta Dental Foundation, and Brian Peters is the Chief Executive Officer at the Michigan Health and Hospital Association, and David Gamlin, Executive Vice President of Midnight Golf. It's all coming up next on Caring for Kids, right here on the great voice of the Great Lakes, News Talk 760 WJR.
It's Caring for Kids with Larry Burns.
Our first guest in the studio is Holli Seabury. Holli is the Executive Director at the Delta Dental Foundation. Dr. Holli Seabury is the Executive Director, and she is responsible for the oversight of the nonprofit philanthropic arm of Delta Dental of Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and North Carolina. Holli holds a doctorate in curriculum and instruction with a specialty in educational technology from the University of Florida. Go Gators.
Yes.
In her previous role as the CEO of Macmillan Health, Holli was the lead curriculum developer for the Brush Oral Health Program, which serves over 1.5 million children nationwide. She is also the author of 4 children's books. Holli is married with 7 children. It's a lot of children. And almost 3 grandchildren. So, Holli, welcome to Caring for Kids.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. You're a very, very busy woman, and appreciate you stopping by WJR to talk to our listeners, talk to me about the great things that the Delta Dental Foundation is doing. I mentioned that you cover not only Michigan and Ohio and Indiana and North Carolina, and so tell us about some of the key initiatives, and also do they vary by state?
Well, it's interesting because the issues with oral health really are national issues, and they vary little state by state. But how states choose to address those issues does vary quite a bit. Okay. And so when we look at, for instance, in Ohio, they are really addressing access to children's oral health through the schools. So they're doing a lot of in-school clinics. We just funded the Cleveland Clinic to go into schools and provide oral health care. And here in Michigan, the one unique problem we do have is the water crisis.
Right.
And so we've done a lot of funding around water, around safe water, water stations in schools. So we've done a lot of projects helping keep children's teeth healthy when they're not accessing fluoride.
Great. That certainly makes sense. And do you see differences in rural areas versus in big cities?
Yeah, there's a huge difference in rural areas. There's a misconception that health problems exist in urban areas. Across the nation, there are much higher health issues in the rural areas. Right. Part of that is transportation issues, lack of providers, lack of education. And so we see a lot of serious issues. Within dental, one of the biggest issues we see in the rural areas is the lack of pediatric dentists. And a lot of our families just can't access that because of distance.
Yeah. We're talking with Holli Seabury, who's the Executive Director of the Delta Dental Foundation, covering 4 states. Previous to this, you served as the CEO of Macmillan Health for 10 years. Tell us about that organization, and does Macmillan Health and Delta Dental Foundation partner on anything as you move forward?
Yes. We have had a flourishing relationship between the Delta Dental Foundation and Macmillan Health. The foundation funded the initial development of the Brush Project, which is, and that's oral health education primarily through WIC and Head Start. So it's professional development for the people who work with the families. It's direct education to children, direct education to parents. And so the foundation and Macmillan Health have worked very closely on a number of projects, most recently on oral health materials for early interventionists who work with children with special health care needs.
I mentioned in your intro that you have authored 4 books.
I have.
I think they're about oral health for kids.
They are.
And so how have they been received by kids? And tell us a little bit about that.
So that was something I fell into by necessity. The first book came about because Delta Dental Foundation had contracted me to do a lit review of all the children's books on oral health so they could give that out to the schools in their states. And as I did that lit review, and I literally read every children's book on oral health from preschool through elementary school, I realized there was a gap in the literature, 2 gaps in the literature, one in an accurate baby board book, the hard books for little babies, and 2 in a book for children that talked about why our primary teeth or our baby teeth are important for growth and development, for speech, for social emotional health. And so as I turned in the lit review, I said to the Terry Battaglieri, the former director, hey, this is kind of interesting. There's this gap in the literature. And she said, well, why don't you fill it? Why don't you write those books and we'll fund that? And I thought,
careful what you say.
I don't know how to write a children's. I've never done this before, but I have had a number of children. And so I've read a lot of children's books. And so I worked with our very talented graphic artist, Jen Story at Macmillan. And we did the books. And what was exciting, and then more books came out of that, including a book with Johns Hopkins on asthma for children. And what happened that was very exciting was the first book, which is about a little boy who wants to buy a robot toy, and he asks the tooth fairy to take all his teeth at once and leave him $20 for all his primary teeth so he can buy this toy, and then he realizes all the things he needs his teeth for. It was mentioned to us, gosh, this would make a great school assembly. And so I ended up writing that, and that has been performed for, at least 50,000 students in the tri-state area, and that is an ongoing project. So it was really exciting to see one of our books on stage with actors and music. Yeah, it's been fun.
Good. We're in the process of putting together a book for the Children's Foundation. We have a relatively new mascot called Champ. And Champ is the superhero of wellness. And so Champ will be in this book talking about wellness and things like that. So we'll make sure that we cover dental care.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Champ fits into what you're doing as well. So our Children's Foundation is dedicated to improving health and wellness for all children and adults, young adults, and their families. And we're now helping families and other organizations run their own foundations. So one that we started a year ago with the Daniels family is the Jamie Daniels Foundation, which I think you're familiar with. It's beginning to educate people about the dangers of opioid addiction. Eventually, in the next couple of years, we want to be able to open up a long-term recovery center called the Jamie Daniels Recovery Center for opioid and heroin addicts. And do you see parallels? I know we have a new partnership with Delta Dental in our Jamie Daniels efforts. And for the foundation's perspective, do you see some parallels in your priorities and what we're doing with the Jamie Daniels Foundation?
Yeah, absolutely. In my previous position, which was True Public Health, I actually did a lot of work around opioids and most especially women with opioid use disorder who become pregnant and then that impact upon their child and ongoing education that's needed there. And our priority is to really have healthy, smart, vibrant communities. The opioid epidemic has been absolutely devastating. And we have not only lost a lot of lives and a lot of young lives, but we've had a lot of lives just adversely, permanently impacted by this epidemic. And so it is, and there is definitely some correlation with opioid prescription through dental offices. which they have worked on a lot in diminishing that. But yeah, absolutely. I don't think you can be in any type of health arena, no matter what it is, right now in this nation, and not be in some way, shape, or form looking at the opioid epidemic.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned not only have we lost lives, but impacting lives. And one of the things we've seen, or haven't really seen it as much as I've heard about it, is more and more grandparents raising their grandchildren because the parents are either lost their lives or that they're just not capable of raising their children. So that's really impacting people as well. So together, I think we can improve things, and we're dedicated to it, not only through Jamie Daniels Foundation, but the Children's Foundation, and would love to continue to partner with not only the company, but the foundation in the future as it relates to this. So Holly, thank you very much.
Thank
You're doing
you.
great work. Congratulations on your great career and your relatively new position as Executive Director at the Delta Dental Foundation. So thank you, Holli Seabury. Coming up next, we're going to hear from Brian Peters. Brian is the Chief Executive Officer of the Michigan Health and Hospital Association. And that's when Caring for Kids continues here on the great voice of the Great Lakes, News Talk 760 WJR.
Welcome back to Caring for Kids on WJR, presented by the Children's Foundation.
Hopefully everyone's having a great summer. Speaking of summer, I just got back from Mackinac, where I saw Brian Peters, who's on the line. Brian is Chief Executive Officer at the Michigan Health and Hospital Association, known as MHA, one of the nation's largest state hospital associations. Brian's responsibilities include executive leadership of the MHA Health Foundation, as well as the MHA Service Corporation, which provides fee-based services to the healthcare field. In his 29 years with the Michigan Health and Hospital Association, Brian has served as the Executive Vice President and the Senior Vice President of Advocacy. In those roles, he was responsible for the state and federal government relations on behalf of nearly 150 Michigan community hospitals. Brian holds a master's degree in health services and administration from the University of Michigan and a bachelor's degree in business administration from Michigan State University. So he has those two universities covered. Go Green, and he's also a Wolverine. So Brian, welcome to Caring for Kids.
Larry, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
It's great to hear your voice. And I mentioned that we were up on Mackinac. We were celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Michigan Health and Hospital Association, and it was a great several days. And I know you had people from many decades of leadership there, and so I know our listeners want to hear more about the highlights of that important anniversary on Mackinac.
Well, I appreciate that. And you mentioned the venue. The Grand Hotel has been a wonderful partner for the Michigan Health and Hospital Association. In fact, with our 100-year anniversary, over 50 of our annual meetings have been held right there at the Grand Hotel, which is pretty remarkable.
That is.
They've just done such a phenomenal job. Really a jewel for the state of Michigan, as you
great.
well know.
Yeah, it was great fun. So 29 of those years, you probably were there because you've been at MHA for 29 years.
That is exactly correct, and it's been a real privilege for me to be with the association for that length of time, just coming up on my 30th anniversary.
Yeah, and how has the MHA evolved over the years?
Well, there's been a very significant evolution. When I came to MHA nearly 30 years ago, we were an organization that was focused almost exclusively on what happened inside the four walls of a traditional acute care hospital. And at that point in time, Michigan was home to well over 200 hospitals, and virtually all of them at that time were truly independent. They were not part of a multi-hospital system at all. And today, of course, The number of hospitals has greatly diminished. We have just over 130 hospitals in the state. The number of inpatient beds has literally been cut in half over that period of time as a result of new technology and prescription drugs and payment reform and mainly from consolidation, because those hospitals mainly are part of multi-hospital systems now. And so it's a very different dynamic today in Michigan than it was 30 years ago, and we've done our best as an organization to evolve along with that change.
Yeah, you sure have. And you mentioned some of that, and the foundation that I work for, the Children's Foundation, we evolved our name because you were kind enough to mention that up on Mackinac. But the reason we're independent now is because the Children's Hospital of Michigan in 2011 became a for-profit hospital with the sale of the Detroit Medical Center to Vanguard Health, now Tenet. So that was a major change in the Detroit area.
We anticipate that we're going to see more and more of that sort of activity. And quite honestly, where the evolution began was hospital-to-hospital integration, and we still see a great deal of that. But what's happening at the same time now is integration throughout the care continuum. So today, the majority of physicians here in the state of Michigan who are still in active practice are now employed by hospitals or have some sort of a near employment arrangement.
We're talking with Brian Peters. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Michigan Health and Hospital Association, and talking about the great work that they've done for over 100 years and continue to do. And, the way you kind of described outside of the hospital walls, that's what our foundation is all about now, because we're not embedded in a hospital. We're more about wellness. We're about social determinants of health. We have partnerships with Children's Hospital, of course, with Beaumont, with Henry Ford, with DeVos Children's Hospital. So we're becoming statewide, and so it even makes more sense for us to be connected to MHA because you help us get connected. You help give me advice with you and your great staff. So that evolution is both for your organization, but it's certainly benefiting the Children's Foundation.
Well, Larry, you and the Children's Foundation, you've really been terrific to work with, and we're just thrilled to have the partnership that we do because I believe that our goals are certainly aligned, and that is to really advance the health of individuals and communities, and particularly children. What an incredibly important segment of our Michigan population to focus our work around.
Yeah. And so we're a member of MHA, and we've been for a little over a year and a half when I got the job and said we really need to be a member of this organization for advocacy, for other things. And we're, as I mentioned, we're now statewide. We probably will be getting into the Mount Pleasant area with some things with CMU and then up in Traverse City. And so as it relates to MHA, what are some of the emerging activities in pediatrics, in children's health and wellness that our listeners want to hear about? What are some of those initiatives?
Well, we're really focused on children's health in a new and energetic way in the last few years. And one evidence of that would be the fact that we created for the first time in our history a dedicated MHA Council on Children's Health, where we've been able to convene around the table a number of representatives and leaders from major children's hospitals here in the state of Michigan and major pediatrics programs, and really start to focus on what makes a difference. And I think you have to start with the fact that 2 out of every 5 children in Michigan are covered by the Medicaid program. Mm-hmm. And our advocacy year in and year out at both the federal and state level is really designed to make sure that we don't take for granted the fact that Medicaid, My Child, the Children's Health Insurance Program, that all of those public programs are adequately funded to make sure that children have access to preventive care, access to all the services that they might need in the community. So that's first and foremost. It's part of our strategy year in and year out. I would tell you that in recent years, the MHA has also been very focused on safety and quality improvement, working with our member organizations. And to give you one example of where that work has been impactful for moms and babies, we have actually been able to achieve a 68% reduction in unnecessary early elective deliveries since 2010 because of the work of the MHA Keystone Center. This has been very impactful. This actually gets kids off to a good start because it reduces those complications that have often occurred in the past when you have an inappropriate early elective delivery. So we were one of the first states in the country to really get our arms around that issue, and I'm very proud of that work.
As you should be. And I like to say all the time that, kids can't vote, so they have to have advocates for them in Lansing and in Washington. And MHA is certainly a powerhouse in that regard, and that example is perfect for that. So thank you for doing that. And is there anything else, Brian, that you want our listeners to know about the next 100 years or the next year about MHA?
Well, we certainly have a lot on the plate, and you mentioned social determinants of health. I would say that is going to be one of the major focal points for the association in the years ahead. Clearly, we understand that for children in particular, it's one thing to provide outstanding quality care in a healthcare setting, whether that's a hospital, whether that's a physician office, wherever it might be. But quite honestly, the more impactful element is what's the home environment that they're going back to after discharge or after an appointment. That critically impacts their health and wellness going forward. And that's something that MHA and our members now understand. The issue of food insecurity, the issue of transportation challenges. We can't take some of these things for granted. And I think that's a new dynamic that we understand better now than ever before, and that's a real positive.
That's a lot. And I look forward to continuing to work with you and your great staff on these not only advocacy issues, but also we're funding a lot of social determinant type of programs throughout the state now, and everything from mental health, which is just everyone I talk to, everywhere I go, behavioral health is a big issue. I'm working with Luann Ewald at Children's Hospital to try to solve some of the inpatient crisis that most hospitals have in their ERs. But I really look forward personally, and our organization is continuing to work with you over the years to help families and help children have healthy lives.
Well, Larry, that feeling's mutual. We look forward to a continued collaboration and partnership.
Great. That was Brian Peters, Chief Executive Officer of the Michigan Health and Hospital Association. And coming up next, we're going to hear from David Gamlin. David is the Executive Vice President of Midnight Golf, one of our new partners. That's when Caring for Kids continues here on the great voice of the Great Lakes, News Talk 760 WJR.
Welcome back to Caring for Kids on WJR. Presented by the Children's Foundation. Once again, here's Larry Burns.
And in studio now is David Gamlin. David is the Executive Vice President of one of our newest partners is Midnight Golf. David is the Executive Vice President of Midnight Golf and has served in that role since 2001. David was a global equity trader for two major Wall Street firms. He also served in corporate leadership with two automotive suppliers, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. David leads programming for Midnight Golf by developing the mentors and facilitating the program's evaluation and making sure that they continue to help kids. I've seen it firsthand. Was so very, very impressed that I said we need to make a grant, which we've done. David also focuses on developing relationships with partners like us that ensure the financial stability of the organization. David earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in International Business and French, and also earned a certificate in Community Problem Solving from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. So, Dave, welcome to Caring for Kids.
Well, it's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to see you. And our listeners may not be as familiar with Midnight Golf as I am now. And so can you tell us a little bit about Midnight Golf?
I'd be honored to. Again, thanks for having me. And we really do appreciate you being there that day. Speed mentoring is really important. That's one of the few days we invite people from the outside to participate in programming and really giving the young people an opportunity to engage people professionally and try to begin this, developing the skill of networking. Midnight Golf started in 2001. I joined kind of 6-8 months after it
So you've been there from just about the very beginning.
Right about the beginning, and really there to help. I've been involved with youth development in Detroit for about 12 years prior to that. Mostly teaching young people entrepreneurship.
All right.
Over in the east side of Detroit at some schools in Pontiac, just around the area. So that's kind of what I was known for.
Yeah.
But met Renee Fluker, who founded the organization through a mutual friend, and thought I could be helpful by helping her with the programming and the design and helping to train young people that, just sharing kind of the stuff that I learned. And so what happened is we end up, Midnight Golf, don't play golf at midnight, but it was kind of based on the old model or the older programming model that was encompassed by Midnight Basketball, which is sports and life skills kind of connected.
Yeah.
And so we did it, but just in a little bit different way. So we spend 30 weeks training young people, start with high school seniors, helping them transition to college, making sure everybody gets to college, that they stay in college and graduate. And
that's key, stay and
that is really our real genuine focus, and our focus now especially. And then making sure they have a career to begin or a job to begin their careers when they graduate from college, whatever that means. It could be a master's degree. We have doctors, we have attorneys, we have teachers, and we have a whole cadre of professions that are evolving through these young people. We've worked with over 2,500, probably closing in on 3,000 young people since 2001.
Impacting lives. So how does golf fit in? Because everyone asks me that.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that's really interesting. We still believe that that golf is. We don't believe it. It's true that golf is still one of the top relationship developing tools you can have in business. We talk to young people about golf, not to be Tiger Woods, not to play in their college golf team, but wouldn't that be a great thing to have in your bag of tools? And I don't care who you talk to, what young person. That's where they make deals. That's where people meet each other.
Right.
That's where you
Particularly
network.
if they caddy, they see that firsthand.
Absolutely.
And they, if I have a caddy somewhere and they're just watching every second when they're not caddying, and they see relationships building. So you're trying to make sure they understand the value of that.
Precisely. And it ends up being the rock suit metaphor. Like if golf is a tool, guess what other tools you should have?
Yeah.
How do you write well, speak well, negotiate, manage money, have a good resume, get to college, pay for it, stay there.
Right.
All those sorts of things we teach over 30 weeks.
We're talking with Dave Gamlin, Executive Vice President of Midnight Golf, one of our Children's Foundation new partners. And Dave has been talking about a little bit of the history of that. And so I mentioned that we made a recent grant. And so who are some of your other partners? So our listeners can say, oh, I didn't know that X was involved, and maybe they want to get involved too.
So we have a lot of terrific grant-making partners, lots of folks who just give individually, but the Jamie and Denise Jacob Family Foundation they're like our, they've been just connected with us since they started many years ago and have consistently supported us very significantly. We've also been funded by the Skillman Foundation for a number of years. We have received money from Kellogg. We're not being funded by them currently, but they, again, have supported our work, along with the Dresner Foundation, who's a big supporter of ours.
We're not partnering with them now, but we've talked to them.
Absolutely.
Kellogg we do partner with, and Jamie I've talked to about doing some things, and so I had a nice conversation with him the night I was there, as well as afterwards.
And one of our really significant partners is the McGregor Foundation.
Yeah, another great foundation.
Absolutely. So we're funded, by the folks in town who really understand this youth development space fairly significant. I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody because a number of the area banks and their foundations fund us, and corporations. And
well, I know that many of the mentors are from those companies.
They are. Ally is one of our big partners that we have some mentors that are from Ally. So.
Yeah. And so if people want to get involved, is there a way that maybe they can reach out and either by financially supporting or getting involved in some other way?
Absolutely. Really easy. midnightgolf.org is our website.
That's easy, yep.
And that's the connecting point for all of that. For volunteering, for mentoring, for donations, for our events, just to learn about the organization. It's pretty in-depth in terms of how we do what we do. We've been very successful at helping more than 70% of our students graduate from college, which is well above the national average for all students.
Oh, yeah.
And so 100%, nearly 100% of our students go to college, which is still pretty dramatic for Detroit area students. So
I want to talk a little bit about that because I spent 27 years in higher ed in enrollment and marketing at the University of Toledo and the University of Akron. And the statistic you just gave, particularly for first-generation kids of graduating, is that alone talks about and says your success because those numbers don't happen without mentoring. They just don't happen without mentoring. And not only getting a kid into college, but keeping them in college and on that path to graduate. So all you need to do is state the statistics, and people that know anything will say this is a good program.
Right, that's correct.
So a little bit about you. I mentioned you had a successful investment career, and so how'd you end up at Midnight Golf and doing the things you're doing? Yeah,
I was an investment advisor and really became a global equity specialist for pension funds for about 13 years with Dean Witter and Bear Stearns. Companies are no longer operating.
I know of them, though.
But no, it was a great career. And one of my clients asked me kind of after about 12 or 13 years to go into partnership with them running a automotive supplier. And so I did that for 4 years, and it didn't work out so well. We were kind of nearing the 2008 challenge, and tried it again with another company, and it didn't work out so well. And so I spent almost 12, 13 years in the civic engagement space with New Detroit.
Okay.
Following the industry path, and was able to really kind of hone in on kind of the skills and the real caring about our community and thoughtfulness that you could bring to a community if you really had the time to be engaged in it the way we were at New Detroit.
Wow, and you're doing great work.
Thanks.
Speaking of New Detroit, I'm old enough to know that I used to raise money for New Detroit when it was funded by the United Foundation, and one of my mentors and still friend is Walt Douglas.
Without question. One of the greatest gentlemen ever.
Yeah, and his son Ed is a friend of mine too. So they had a Jaguar dealership in Toledo for a while, and that's how I got to know Ed. So, so that's a great path of taking your business skills and then using them to help young people in many ways change their lives and create a path to successful, rewarding lives.
I completely agree. I think that may be part of what's so unique about Midnight Golf. We don't come to this space kind of the traditional education youth development route, but from the business perspective.
Yeah.
How do you create and develop and nurture talent? Regardless of your educational focus or just making sure everybody, whatever we focus on teaching and how we prepare them, it fits no matter where they end up.
Yeah, where they end up. And so speaking of where they end up, you mentioned the majority of the kids going through the program go to college. And then what are some of the places they're going?
So this is on our website as well. As there's over 150 or 60 different colleges. Wow. But let me be clear. More than half, about half, will go to schools in Michigan.
Okay.
And then the rest go everywhere from the university. We've had a student at Peking, University of Peking in China. We've had students, Stanford, Brown,
that's
Dartmouth, not all, but many of the Ivies and a lot of historically black colleges. We have a number of students that go to historically black colleges at the University. Howard and Hampton.
Yeah, Howard's great. Hampton's
can't leave any of them out, else they come after you. FAMU, and let me get it in Tennessee State.
Yeah, and so the folks in the studio that are with me, one's Central Michigan grad, so I assume we have CMU kids.
Fire up chips. Yeah.
That's right. A Madonna grad.
I don't know the amount of that.
And so, we're delighted that we're now a partner with
Absolutely.
you. So, yeah.
Well, we're honored that you guys funded us. You genuinely are, thoughtful about what you've done and, saw us. And so to be, honored in this way, we really appreciate it and don't take it lightly. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, we see it as just the beginning because we're an independent foundation now. We're more about wellness. We're more about pathways to success, and education is the best pathway.
Completely agree with that.
Particularly for kids trying to break decades maybe of poverty, and it's through education. So so I hope that it's a long-term relationship with Midnight Golf.
Likewise.
All righty. David, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
That was David Gamlin, Executive Vice President at Midnight Golf. And next, I'm going to introduce you to this month's Little Champion and provide you an update on some of the foundation events and news. It's coming up next on the great voice of the Great Lakes, News Talk 760 WJR.
It's Caring for Kids with Larry Burns.
Well, this was a great show. 3 great guests doing great things in the state, and delighted to have Caring for Kids being a vehicle to get that word out. And so I also am very happy to talk about our Little Champion. The Little Champion program honors children who have overcome major obstacles in their young lives and continue to tackle those challenges with a smile each and every day. And this month, our Little Champion is 4-year-old Amelia from Rochester, Michigan. Amelia has had 2 kidney transplants, 2, both with complications and frequent readmissions to the hospital. However, despite such challenging circumstances, Amelia continues to fight and do so with a big smile, proving that there's no quit in a Little Champion. And Amelia, congratulations for being this month's Little Champion. For more information on the Little Champion program and how to nominate a child, just visit our Children's Foundation website at yourchildrensfoundation.org/champion. So coming up, we also have the 7th annual Leaders for Kids Summer Recess. That's Saturday, August 10th on the Madison Building rooftop. It's a great party, and it benefits the Children's Foundation. So you can go to our website again for that. And then the first ever Jamie Daniels Foundation Roast of Mickey Redman is Saturday, September 7th. That's at the Motor City Casino Soundboard. It's full of Hall of Famers from the NHL, and they're going to roast Mickey, and all of the money is for the Jamie Daniels Foundation. And to find out about how you can attend that is the jamiedanielsfoundation.org, jamiedanielsfoundation.org website. So that'll be a great night. And then also for our very first time, we are partnering with Paul W. Smith and the Paul W. Smith Golf Classic, and that benefits 4 charities, including Detroit PAL, Variety Children's Charity of Detroit, the Children's Center, and our very own the Children's Foundation. And we're also relaunching a program that was started in 2014, which is Paul's Caring for Kids Club. So look for information about that on the website, which is www.paulwsmithgolf.com. Got a lot going on at the Children's Foundation. We thank you for listening tonight, and we hope you join us next month. Have a great summer, indeed.
Caring for Kids with Larry Burns on WJR has been presented by the Children's Foundation.